Excellent. Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, people of reason, right?
Yes.
We are people of reason. It's good to be here. Rod, thank you for inviting me down. I appreciate it. I have to leave in about an hour to catch a flight to Orlando tonight because I'm not doing a 4:45 a.m. drive to Orlando. That just wouldn't work for me. I probably wouldn't fall asleep. But anyway, I just wanted to take a few minutes and kind of talk to you a little bit about who I am, why I'm here, who the Secular Coalition for America is, how long we've been around, why we exist, what our purpose is, and how we can work together. Because I think that that's incredibly important, something that we definitely want to do, particularly here in the state of Florida. I'll give you a little bit of a Florida legislative update, what happened during this past session, and things that we're looking at for next year, going into the general election this year, and then of course into the legislative session next year. I'm new to the organization. I've been with the Secular Coalition since the last week of December of 2015. So I've just finished about my 7th month. It's a lot of really hard work. I joke around when I talk to people and I say, last year I turned 40 and I wanted to do something easy with the second half of my career. So I thought I'd go work for the secular community, right? It's a lot of work. But it's terrific. I love it. A little bit about myself. I've been in DC for 20 years. I've run local campaigns. I've been a lobbyist for the majority of my career in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. The majority of my work has been in the nonprofit community. I was with the American Red Cross for almost 10 years. I spent a couple of years working on global public health initiatives to combat HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria with a global fund based out of Geneva, Switzerland. I worked in Bill Clinton's administration the last 2 years. I was at the Department of Treasury where I worked on tax and finance legislation. It sounds kind of boring, but it actually was really interesting. And I'm one of those kind of geeky people that really love tax policy. I think you can change the country through the tax code. And so I always enjoyed that. I started my career though on Capitol Hill, working for my hometown member of Congress, former Republican congressman from upstate New York. He was the chair of the Science Committee, and I have to give him some credit because he was actually a Republican who believed in science. He was a big environmentalist. He actually put forth a great deal of legislation because he represented part of the Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York. That's where I come from. I grew up the youngest of 7 children on a dairy farm in a fundamentalist, independent Baptist, Bible Baptist church up until I was a certain age when then I realized I couldn't go anymore. But I've been on my personal journey. On December 29th, between December 29th and January 10th, 11th, whenever they put out the press announcement saying that I was the new executive director, I was talking with members of the board, I was talking with my staff, and we were trying to figure out how I was going to describe myself. I've never been more confused in my life. I came out, 18 years ago as being openly gay to my parents, but I was more confused, in that 2-week period than I was, when it came time for me to, come out to my parents. And the reason I was is because it's a journey, and it's individual identity, and it's incredibly important that we have the ability to say freely who we are without concern that, there would be ramifications. So, where I was at that point in my journey, I felt comfortable saying I was an unaffiliated Christian. Do I believe in the dogma of the church? No. Do I believe in a lot of the superstition of the Bible? No. But do I take some of the culture that I was raised in that has helped to shape me, and do I still hold on to that? And the answer is yes. Well, then I went to the ARC encounter. And, prior to going to the ARC encounter, I was home over the 4th of July weekend, and I sat my parents down and I said, listen, I need you to know that I'm going to come out as an atheist. And my mother looked at me and she said, do you have to use that word? And I said, I do. And she said, well, good for you. And then she said, your father and I couldn't be more proud of what you're doing. So, great. Completely supportive. It's wonderful. I get to tell my two brothers in northern Florida this week that I'm coming out as an atheist. That will be fun. But we'll see how that goes. But all in all, it's been a remarkable journey. And then I picked on David Smalley actually was on his radio program on Dogma Debate, and he said, so there's this buzz that you may have a personal announcement to make. And I said, well, yeah, and so he set it up that I went on his show that Dave was announced, and that it was kind of a big scuttlebutt because I was an unaffiliated Christian leading the largest activist organization for secular Americans in the country, and that what does that mean? Why would the board of directors of the Secular Coalition choose me? And so then he said, so could you just define now what do you think you are? And I said, well, I think I'm a Christian atheist. And he was like, what is that? I don't even know what that is. So it was a lot of fun, but it's still, reflecting the cultural aspect and the respect that I have for my parents and the way that they raised me, and the values that they taught me. But in just a bit, I'm going to talk a little bit about our values, because I think that those are equally, if not much more important than the rhetoric that we hear from the Christian right. I want to talk, though, for a second about who the Secular Coalition is. And my page went flying a little bit. So, Secular Coalition for America is about 15 years old. The first few years, it was all volunteer, no staff, no paid staff, I should say. The idea, though, was that as secular groups in this country were starting to get more attention, and they were starting to garner more press, more reaction from lawmakers, that wouldn't it make sense if we created an organization that could do two things, basically. One, help to organize the major secular groups in the country around legislative initiatives, so that we're all talking on the same page, we're all working toward the same goal. But two, equally as important, to give secular organizations, members of secular organizations, and secular Americans across the country a voice in Washington, so that we could start lobbying Capitol Hill directly, so that we could start working within the administration, within federal agencies, and ultimately so that we could start working in state capitals as well across the country. And that's who we are, and that's what we do. Today we have 19 member organizations, everyone from American atheists to the Unitarian Universalists, American humanists to ex-Muslims of North America. It runs the gamut. And the great thing about our community is that we're so diverse. We have David Silverman, who is loud and boom, and I love you, David, if you're listening. But we have that form of activism, which is important, and it's so, and it struck me when I was at the ARC Encounter a couple of weeks ago in Kentucky, just how important David Silverman is to our community. All the way to the more, the attempts to work in interfaith communities and to create alliances and build bridges, of which I think both are extremely important. We can look at the LGBTQ community, and we can take some of the things that they did right out of their playbook to help us in our activism. I think that we have a lot of lessons that we can learn from that. But where we are right now as an organization, we're growing. I'm glad to say that we're growing. We're doing well. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, where Todd Stiefel hosted our board, and we had a lot of input from other stakeholders for a strategic planning session. It was a great 72 hours. We got a lot accomplished. I'm excited because as the new executive director, I really had to get us through the Reason Rally back in June, and now we can focus on some of the real changes to make us a stronger, more effective, and more engaged organization, which is one of the reasons I'm here today, because that means reaching out to community organizations working with community groups, getting you involved in the work that we're doing, so that you sign up for our action alerts, you send letters to your members of Congress, you work with your elected officials here in Florida, in your hometowns and in Tallahassee, so that we can go up against bills that are blatant religious privilege, and we can put forth legislation that actually helps to move our community forward, which I think is something that we absolutely want to do. This year, I'll give you a couple of examples of some of the things that we've done this year that I'm excited about, because I think that it sets us up for years to come. We had our largest ever lobby day in Washington. We had over 300 scheduled meetings with lawmakers in DC. And it was great because it wasn't Larry the lobbyist walking up to the Hill meeting with Congressman Smith. It was John David from Congressman Smith, his hometown, walking into his office and meeting with the legislator. So it's putting a face to elected officials that, listen, you have atheists that live in your community that you represent. You have agnostics, you have humanists, you have other non-theists, you have free thinkers. And for those members of Congress, it's incredibly important when you create that alignment. They get excited when their constituents come all the way to Washington to meet with them. And then they get excited when they then see their constituent at the local grocery store when they go home for a recess. These are these are opportunities to build relationships, and they're incredible. And we had a great turnout for our lobby day. We did the United States Senate on a Thursday. We did the House of Representatives on a Friday. I may have flipped that around, but I think I'm right. And altogether, we had 400 people come from across the country to join us for lobby days. We hit more than 300 offices with direct meetings, but every single office on Capitol Hill received our literature, of which there's some of it in the back that I can explain in a little bit. We did a couple of other things. This is something I hope excites all of you that we can replicate here in Florida. Not long after the Reason Rally, we had this opportunity because of the local county Democratic chairman in the state of Texas, who went to the state Democratic Party and convinced them that we should do a secular caucus at their state convention. Well, the state party said, all right, whatever, go ahead, you can do it. So they gave us a room. They had about this number of chairs set up. I was there with the person who runs our state program, Sarah Levin, out of Washington, D.C. And, we were in San Antonio. And I said to Sarah, if you made me travel all the way here, and I only have a handful of people show up, I'm going to be really angry. Because working for the Red Cross for 10 years, I've spent my fair share of time in Texas. I don't need to go back. Well, I was surprised. I was elated. 400 people showed up. Standing room only. 400 people showed up. And they were excited and they were hungry. And it was people who have faith that were like, what's this about? We want to know. And they listened to us and they engaged with us. Orlando just happened. They were angry, they were hurt, they were suffering, just like we were. So, it was fascinating to see that. To see that number of people come, to see that many supporters. We had 3 planks that we put forth for the state party's platform. All 3 of them passed. It was amazing. We were like, how did this happen? How did this happen? And it just happened. It just was, so, we've been very busy in Texas ever since. Continuing to build those alliances, those relationships. Last week, we were at the Democratic National Convention, and we hosted a secular reception. It wasn't a recognized reception by the Democratic Party at the national level. It wasn't a caucus, but we still had an incredible turnout. We had over 200 people RSVP to join us. And there's the interesting thing about what happened was that, of course, on Friday and Saturday before the convention began, there was this trickle of the leaks that were coming from WikiLeaks and the Democratic Party's emails about Senator Sanders and whether or not he's an atheist. And if that's going to play well with my Southern Baptist friends in Kentucky and in Tennessee and elsewhere, said the former CFO Brad Marshall. And so a lot of people were asking us, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And my position has been every Democrat in this country should feel disappointed because they didn't live up to the values of their party, because they continue to push this silly notion that if you're not a person of God, you can't be elected to public office. That if you're an atheist, you don't deserve to be elected. That the American people will reject you. The party that has been more helpful to us than the other major political party, and by the way, the Secular Coalition for America is a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse candidates, but I think it's clear to see that there's one party that has been more effective on our issues, and there's one party that's been less effective on our issues. With that said, though, we should still be disappointed in the Democratic Party because of what they did. And there's a lot of learning that still needs to happen. And that's why I was extremely proud to be at the Democratic Convention last week. So we could be a voice, so we could be there and we could say exactly that, and so that people heard us loud and clear. We had signs that we took. One of them said, "Make America secular again." That was kind of fun, right? The other talked about our values: freedom, inclusion, equality, and knowledge. We had pins that said "Secular Values Voter," which is another thing that we did this year. We developed new ways to talk about our issues. The religious right, for whatever reason, thinks that they have a trademark on values in this country. But they don't, because we have values too. And let's look at our values. We believe in freedom. Now think about the religious right when I say this. We believe in freedom. They don't. We believe in inclusion. They don't. We believe in equality. They don't. We believe in knowledge. And when I was at the Ark, I learned that they believed that we lived among dinosaurs, and we actually put saddles on them and rode them around. So, I don't know. I have a hard time suggesting that perhaps they believe in knowledge, but we do. This is a great way for us to talk about our issues that make lawmakers think about us differently. Because we're not there screaming in their face, "This bill is terrible." We're there reminding them that we're people who have values. Our values reflect American values. Because don't we believe in freedom and equality and inclusion and knowledge as a nation? Even Secretary Clinton the other night said it during her speech. She said, "I believe in science." How sad is it that in 2016, someone has to say that? But they do. It's been a busy year. It's been an exciting year. It's been a fun year. I do want to talk a little bit about what we've done in Florida. And I was on the plane and I couldn't print anything, so I had to write it out in longhand. In Florida this year, the Secular Coalition for Florida, through action alerts and everything else, helped to send more than 500 letters to Florida lawmakers to let them know where the secular community stands on key issues, including fighting back against attacks on access to reproductive health care, protecting LGBTQ youth from the dangerous and debunked practice of conversion therapy. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for never doing that to me, by the way. Speaking out against so-called Protection of Religious Freedom Act, which would have legalized discrimination based on religious beliefs. And I'm going to come back to that one in a minute because I have a few thoughts on it. Just so you all know, we depend on Floridians to be engaged in the work that we do. And you can sign up back there, or you can send an email to florida@secular.org. We have some folks in the state who help lead our efforts, and we would love to connect you. Sarah Levin at our national headquarters runs our state programs. We're going to start to do something a little bit different, though, and I'm excited about this at the state level, because we're not experts on state legislation. You know, we're really good at the federal stuff because, you know, we see those people a lot. We work with them all the time. We've had experiences working on Capitol Hill and in state legislatures. It's really the best barometer we can have about what's happening on the ground is from people like you, because you're engaged in your local communities. You're engaged in what happens at the state level. If you don't, perhaps you'll get to know your local lawmakers. All of that is incredibly busy, or is incredibly important and incredibly beneficial to the work that we try to do across the country. The Secular Coalition for Florida opposed this year 4 anti-choice bills, one of which, though, was passed and signed into law, HB 1411. It effectively eliminates all Planned Parenthood funding, which is a joke. You know, I see these congressmen up in Washington talking about, you know, Chaffetz talking about, we're going to get rid of Planned Parenthood funding. Well, then you need to do that for every clinic in the country, because it's not funding. It's not like they sit around and they're like, well, this year we're going to write in $448 million for Planned Parenthood into the budget. It's a Medicaid reimbursement. That's all it is. Someone who's on Medicaid going into a clinic to have a pap smear, and the federal government reimbursing that clinic for that. There's no difference if they went to a Planned Parenthood clinic or they went to the local hospital. It's still a Medicaid reimbursement. And we know why they're doing it. And this is something that we can say. Congressman, you're doing this because of your religion. And you think that money is going to provide abortions, when in fact it's not. Because there's been a federal law in place that provides no federal tax dollars ever go to perform an abortion. But, you know, that's okay. Unfortunately, HB 1411, though, will also have the unintended, well, I should say for us unintended, but for them, probably the intended consequence of shutting down a lot of clinics in this state. The only way that we can react to it now is through the courts. With members of our organization, we're looking into that with our partners that we work closely with, everyone from FFRF to the ACLU to the other local groups that provide legal aid services, you know, something that we want to look at. Fortunately, even though the Senate has decided not to do their job and give at least a hearing and perhaps an up and down vote on the Supreme Court nominee, fortunately the court did the right thing when they decided the Texas case a few weeks ago. I have to say I was surprised. I was surprised, but I was elated. HB 43, we opposed this bill. It's called the Pastor Protection Act. I love it. It ended up passing, but because of the work that Floridians did to oppose this bill, a much more watered-down version was passed. It's basically a reiteration of existing federal law that allows religious organizations and their employees to deny services that conflict with their beliefs. HB 401, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, allows for discrimination based on religious beliefs. There was no Senate companion bill. It basically ended up dying in the House. HB 1403, the Pledge of Allegiance bill. This one I found to be really interesting when I read it earlier today, because apparently it's mandated in the state of Florida that in public schools there has to be a sign that says to students that you are not required to stand and or recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, the conservatives wanted to get rid of that because they want all students to have to stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. The bill died, unfortunately. We supported HB 137, the anti-conversion therapy bill, to ban conversion therapy for LGBTQ youth 18 or younger. How many of you think that bill passed in Florida? You're right, it didn't, clearly. And we tracked several other bills. I'll just give you a couple examples. HB 45, to provide anti-discrimination protections for LGBTQ communities in Florida. That bill also died in committee. HB 4019, the same-sex licensing, marriage licensing bill, that would establish, this is strange, a universal form for people to get married. No, we have to have more than one form, apparently. It's no longer marriage equality or same-sex marriage. It's just marriage, right? So I think that what was that? The Federal Paperwork Reduction Act. Maybe we should actually invoke that or something. And then the House Concurrent Resolution 8001, which would have ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. Sadly, your state didn't pass that either, even though it was just a non-binding concurrent resolution and basically a sense of the legislature. So that's what's happening in Florida. We have no doubt that this coming year is going to be as busy, if not more busy than what we've seen. I want to talk about the perception of religious freedom bills in this country. Clearly, the Pulse shooting that left 49 LGBTQ individuals and their allies dead, 53 injured, some of whom are still in the hospital, really affected our country in a difficult way, but a meaningful way. The House Committee on Government Reform and Oversight, chaired by Jason Chaffetz from Utah, decided to hold a hearing on a bill called the First Amendment Defense Act. The bill basically, just to boil it down, says that you have a right to discriminate if you have a deeply held belief. This is at the federal level. I mean, we see it popping up at the state levels. They know they can't really get away with calling it RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, because we already have one of those bills. It was passed in the 90s at the federal level. We're working to repeal that bill, by the way. Even if it's piece by piece, we're going to get rid of that bill. The First Amendment Defense Act, something clearly different, would provide federal, basically what it does is it takes and it elevates prejudice above the law. And they do it in this guise of saying, well, we're protecting the First Amendment. Just like we're protecting religious freedom, right? Here's the really disgusting thing about that bill, though. Part of the reason it came about was because it was a reaction to what the Supreme Court did a year ago in creating marriage equality. Part, not all of the reason, but it was the biggest reason. Jason Chaffetz decided that on the 1-month anniversary of what happened in Orlando, he was going to hold a hearing in Washington, D.C. on that bill. On the anniversary of what happened in Orlando, he was going to promote an anti-gay marriage, anti-equality piece of legislation. When I was at the ARC, I realized a couple of things. The biggest thing I realized is that we're the nice people. The counter-protesters were the ones who were saying all sorts of things that were detestable, that went against any idea of inclusion or equality that you could imagine. And they have $30 million, up to $30 million worth of taxpayer dollars that will end up going to fund this ARC. But yet, in their hiring practices, you have to attest that Jesus Christ is your personal Lord and Savior. If you're unmarried, You have to sign a chastity pledge that you will not have sex until you're married. And all of these other conditions. So, Catholics can't even work there. Jewish people can't work there. Gays can't work there. It goes down the list and the list. You have to be their brand of conservatism, of Christian conservatism, to work there. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. And I said to one of the counter-protesters who was there, I said, what about your discrimination policies? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, you're in your hiring practices. And he said, oh, they're legal. And I said, so you're Jesus in the book of Matthew, who says, that which you did not do for the least among us, you did not do for me. Is your Jesus okay with discriminating against other people or forcing people down because it's legal? Their perversion of what religious freedom in this country looks like is obscene. And it should offend every single one of us. I know it certainly offends me. When I would watch CNN and I would see or Fox News or any other news channel for that matter, and I would see some Christian who's never met me, who's never laid eyes on me, who has no idea who I am as a human being, but just because I'm gay, would dare to take away my constitutionally protected rights. The question, I guess, becomes, do we live in a democracy where we are a law of man, or do we live in a theocracy where we are laws of God? And I think that you wouldn't be here if you thought we lived in a theocracy. I think you're here because you want to protect our democracy. I've gone on for several minutes, longer than that page just keeps going away from me, longer than I wanted to. But I do want to open it up for Q&A and for just a dialogue, if you'd like. We would love to have you engaged in the work that we do. We would love to assist you in whatever work you want to do in Florida. This is how we can change we can get rid of the words "in God we trust" in our courtrooms or on our dollar bills. This is how we can remind people that it wasn't until the mid-50s that "under God" was inserted into our Pledge of Allegiance, or that "in God we trust" became our national motto. People forget that. People forget that we were never founded, nor have we ever been a Christian nation. And so I really believe this is by far the most important work I'll ever do. There are some handouts back there. There's a brochure. There's a press release that we did on the Texas Democratic Party to change the platform to include what we did. The provisions of it are on the back of it. When we were at the Democratic National Convention last week, we put together a fact sheet, why the Democratic Party's future depends on non-religious voters. 28% of Democrats are non-religious. That's more than, it's not right here, but that's more than 21% who are evangelicals, 18% who are Catholic. We're the largest religious demographic in the Democratic Party. And this may surprise you, but it doesn't surprise me. 14% of Republicans are also non-religious. The numbers are growing. It's on our side. It's a great thing. I'm excited about it. I hope you're excited about it, because what it means is that we will actually create a country that is based on freedom, inclusion, knowledge, and equality. So thank you for having me. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
How many congressmen do you think are actually secular, in actuality?
I would say at least 30. At least 30.
The House and the Senate?
I would say probably 20 to 25 in the House and 5 to 10 in the Senate.
5 to 10 in the
And
Senate.
I've had members of Congress literally walk up to me and say, I don't believe, but I can't say that. And I look at him and I say, I came out of the closet, why don't you?
That's
Come
what
on!
We need to change that.
Well, and you're raising a point, because in fact, I have some literature back here about the Openly Secular campaign. Have you heard about that? I take a look at it. It's a wonderful campaign. I think it's really important that, I look at the way that a few years ago the It Gets Better campaign kind of took the country by storm, because we had all of this bullying happening, and little kids were getting beaten up, and kids were taking their own lives. This goes right to the heart of the same thing. You don't have to be LGBT or Q to make an It Gets Better video. You could just be a supporter. There are such things as religiously secular people. And I think it's important that we work with them as well in the construct to making atheism and agnosticism and humanism and everything else that's in the non-theistic community, in terms of making that more available, more acceptable, more respectable, and certainly more of a norm in this country. The thing that bothers me a lot about this is that, and this is where we need to become organized as a community, the conservative Christian right is a very small minority of people in this country. But they are vocal, they are organized, and they have money. And, they don't have the numbers we have, though. They don't have the numbers that we have. So I think that, that's where I want to spend a lot of my focus over the next several years, is helping to build this voter bloc. Secular Values Voter goes a long way toward that, because we're getting behind a shared set of values, and we're talking about our issues as values. And the other thing that I think that Secular Values Voter will have a great impact on, perhaps not this election, but certainly going into the midterm elections in 2018, is being able to look up your member of Congress and say, wow, look at their voting record. They got a C. Why aren't they getting a B+ or an A- or an A? So we're doing voter score. We're doing congressional scorecards. Yeah, and that's all up on our website now. So I encourage you to do it.
One thing you can do that would help a local organization is when you send those press releases out, send them in a form that can be sent to the members, where they can just sign their name in the bottom and send it into their representative.
The action alerts, is that what you mean?
Yes, the
Yeah,
action alerts,
okay.
the press releases,
Yep. Okay.
so that, make it in a form that can be just signed and mailed in, or given to the
Right.
representative.
Yep.
Those people are lazy.
Yeah, I that's something I do want to look at. Our vendor, we use CapWiz, CQ, Engage. I think they're all one now. But it should be a seamless process in terms of being able to do that. But I'm hearing it's not. And if that's the case, then we need to fix that.
Well, make it in a form that can be personalized by each member of each group.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean.
So
Yeah.
that they can just sign that in and say, yes, I agree with this, and send it in.
Right.
Rather than just a form letter that informs you what's going on.
Mhm.
The other thing is, I like the idea that you're grading the congressman. They're aware of this now.
Yes.
That you're grading them.
Yes, they are. Yes, they
Let's
are.
make that make them quite aware of that.
I think we're going to have an interesting 2017. I think this election this November is going to, well, let me put it this way. All the candidates that said, God told me I should run for office, got beat. Right? Ted Cruz, I'm a Christian first. I'm a American second. I'm a conservative third. I'm a Republican fourth. Bye, Ted. Bye, Senator. It just, no one's fit for office if they don't start every morning down on their knees. I don't know what goes on in their bedroom, but I'm not going to touch that one. I don't know. I think that we're seeing some cracks in the facade of, the stronghold of the religious right, and I think that, we have a lot of great candidates out there. Not this coming week, the following week, we're going to start publicizing who openly secular candidates are running for local and state and federal office across the country. On our website, we'll do that on social media. There are a handful that I'm just so excited about because I think that they have the opportunity to be tremendous leaders, but they also have the opportunity to create some precedent, for running for office in red states and winning. And so we'll see if that happens. But
now, you touched on that you've taken all the different atheist groups, or not all of them, but a majority of them, and you're working with them, American Atheist, CFI. How do you communicate with them? How do you address, this is what our focus is going to be this particular year, these are the issues with those organizations?
So it's a great question, and I'll be the first one to admit we need to do a much better job of it. Now that the Reason Rally is behind us, now that a lot of the political stuff that happened in July is behind us, and now that we've also engaged in this, strategic planning retreat, we're going to see a lot of changes relatively quickly. The first is going to be the creation of something we've never had before. But I've always used throughout my entire career in Washington. It's kind of boring, but people don't like to talk about metrics and they don't like to talk about benchmarks and all of that sort of stuff. But it's important that we track what we're doing because it does two things. One, it makes us look we failed to meet any of those benchmarks, so maybe our strategies are wrong. Maybe our tactics are wrong. Maybe we have to do something different or figure out something else. It also allows us to say, instead of just reacting, you know how I read that list of all of the issues in Florida that we opposed?
Mm-hmm.
Well, instead of just reacting to legislation being introduced that we oppose, and then we're scrambling to fight against it, which is still important. And don't ever let anyone tell you that if you defeat a bill, it's not as important as passing a bill. Because in many cases, it's more important. But we can lead. Instead of just react, we can lead. So I want to create something that I call the LEBA, the Legislative and Executive Branch Agenda, that has input coming from all of our member organizations. What are the important areas that we should focus on? Instead of having, we can still have 25 or 30 different issues on our website that we take a position on. But what are the most 5 crucial issues that we're going to focus our energies on, we're going to focus our attention on, and we're going to make real progress? And the way, to answer your question, Ron, the way that we communicate that is to be what we're supposed to be. Your lobbyist in Washington. I think that we've kind of gotten off course a little bit over the years with different activities and different ideas, and that's all fine and good, but we need to get back to basics, and we need to be, our mission needs to be lobby, lobby, lobby. We need to be the lobbyists again, and we need to drive public policy in Washington and at the state level. So we'll do that through the creation of a policy committee that will include stakeholders from our member organizations, so that we're not creating this LEBA in a vacuum, but we're doing it collectively as a community, so that we have. It's important to have buy-in, but it's also important to have ownership from our member organizations in terms of what it is that we're doing. And the good thing about it is, I think this is terrific. We now have lobbyists in some other organizations, American Atheists, American Humanists. They have government affairs representatives. They have counsel that works on public policy issues, CFI. So it's great, and it makes my job easier, because if I'm Larry the lobbyist and I have all these relationships on Capitol Hill, and I go to see a committee staffer, and I'm up there being like, this issue, if I bring a subject matter expert, then guess what I all of a sudden become? I become that congressman's resource. And that's the best thing that we can do in terms of creating long-standing relationships that are based on substance and not just on personality and engagement.
Another question. you're working with the national organizations and you're doing a lot of work nationally. What can local organizations do to help you on state level? You touched on being your point source for what's happening locally at state and local levels. But how can we be activists that support what you're doing? Are there legislative days that happen statewide?
Sure. There's got to be more coordination around that. Really nice meeting you. Thank you. There's got to be more coordination around that as well. And ideally, we have chapter leaders in 33, 34 states right now. As you can imagine, across the country, you have some where there's a really, really high degree of sophistication and engagement. And they're doing the legislative tracking, and they've got lists of volunteers, of people that they know will sign letters and will call their congressman and do all of that sort of stuff. So we need more people, first of all. I mean, that's the big thing. But we need more people who are willing to step up in leadership roles as well. I know that in the state of Florida, we have essentially one or two people who are doing the vast majority of the legislative tracking. Now, here's the thing I like about volunteer management and working with volunteers. Say that you're interested in reproductive health issues and you're interested in RFRA laws. But you don't care about either of those things. But you do care about death with dignity and end-of-life compassion and choice. And you do care about LGBT equality. So why don't you track those issues and you track those issues? You can give people assignments that they want to do and that they're excited about working on and that engage them at their point of interest. So I think that we need to do more of that. The other thing that I think we need to do is we need to, I'm a medic by training also. I'm a volunteer medic on the weekends when I'm home, which means that since January 1st I haven't been a medic at all, except on a plane once, but that's another story. And, actually it was one flight and it was twice. There were two medical emergencies on one flight from Dallas to Phoenix, I think it was. Terrible. And now I've never ever told the flight attendants ever again that, I have this, I can be helpful. But anyway, it was the first and only time, and it got me. We do this thing called mutual aid. So, if New Jersey becomes overrun because of a massive flood, they need support, then they'll call Maryland and they'll say, hey, Maryland, can you send 40 ambulances, 20 EMTs, 20 paramedics, can you send that crew up to help us out? And Maryland says, yeah, we can help you. It's called mutual aid between states. We can do the same thing. I look at the Phoenix chapter, which is our flagship chapter. They're an affiliate, they're not a chapter, in the state of, in Arizona. They have their own board. They do their own fundraising. They pay their own staff. They have a paid professional state lobbyist who is one of the best lobbyists I've ever met in my life, working for them. She knows every member of the Senate and the House, and it's terrific. But think about it this way. They've had to deal with end-of-life choice already. So they have talking points. They have strategy papers. They have press releases. They have op-eds. They have all of this information. And then all of a sudden it shows up in Nevada. And Nevada is maybe not as strong or as sophisticated. Nevada, I don't know this, so don't hold it against me. As Arizona, I'm just using you as an example. Arizona could provide mutual aid to Nevada. And it cuts, at that point, then national headquarters, is kind of the middleman, and it cuts us out. But it allows where the actual expertise can flourish and grow to happen, and that's at the local level. And that's what we need. So these are changes I'm looking forward to making. And I think that, as we do this, we can recognize that we already have this huge wealth of knowledge and information and strategies and legislative proposals. It's all out there. It's just how do we get it into the hands of local community individuals who would look at it and be like, I'm excited about that. I want to do that in my state. And so that's what I really want to to work on and build on.
So do you have a volunteer organizer who then would reach out to people who are interested in supporting at a state level?
Yeah, so Sarah's one of them, who I mentioned at our national level. Sarah's one of them, but we also have the individuals, the leaders in individual states who help to really coordinate the efforts of the boots on the ground.
Okay.
Now, one of the things Rod said to me was that he would love to, get a couple of buses and go up to Tallahassee to do some advocacy work. And, I know that you have a lot of people that you can reach out to here in South Florida. It would be amazing, and we would take you up on that. I don't know if there's scheduled for an advocacy or a lobby day next year, but I can certainly check on that and get back in
If
touch.
you would, that'd be great. I know that tomorrow we'll be at a leadership summit with a number of the other
Right.
groups throughout the state, and I think it'd be a good opportunity to, I know I'll be networking with other groups. One of the ideas, I've already talked to a number of people from other groups about sharing speaker costs, because when we do it individually, it costs us thousands of dollars to fly someone down, put them up.
Right.
And so when we're able to share within the groups, if we're able to defer some of that cost, and then it's
That's right.
$500-600 per group. So if we did something with lobby days, you said, hey, lobby days are coming, these are the points we're gonna hit on, and if we get 10 people from that group, 20 people from that group, suddenly you have 100 people who show up in Tallahassee, and that makes a huge statement.
Yeah, it's amazing, and to go to some of these lobby days. My first official trip as new executive director was to Phoenix, Arizona. The Arizona chapter put on a lobby day. It was so amazing. There were over 100 people there. They had a tent right on the grounds of the Capitol, so we did some speeches there. Then we marched into the Capitol, and we had signs and we had issues, and we met with lawmakers, and we went into the chambers and we watched the proceedings happening in the House and in the Senate. We had a member of the House and a member of the Senate who recognized the Secular Coalition for Arizona for being there that day. It just raised so much awareness. And here's a really cool other thing that they did. You know how a lot of legislatures have annual, they'll have like a prayer caucus. So weekly they'll get together and pray. Well, they put together a secular caucus in the Arizona legislature. And the secular caucus meets every week or every other week. And it's lawmakers, some of whom, there's an open atheist lawmaker in the Arizona House, but many of whom are people that claim to have a faith. And they go and they listen to speakers to hear about the foundations of our country, and to hear about true secularism and what the First Amendment really means. And to hear about stories about, captivating stories about the way that non-theists in this country are prejudiced against and are treated poorly. And it really helps to raise awareness. I mean, I think it's wonderful. The last time I was there, I wanted to go to the caucus, but I had it was a conflict and I couldn't do it. But I'm hoping to go sometime soon.
All right. Any other questions? All right, Larry, I know that you're going to be heading off to Orlando.
Yeah.
Catch a flight. I really appreciate you coming out.
That's my pleasure.
Just so you guys know, this costs Flash nothing but a few dollars for the room. And so Flash is going to be making a donation, but we also are taking any donations you want to give. We're putting this up on YouTube, making sure that we reach all the other people who couldn't attend today. And I look forward to being affiliated with you guys and working on future.
We do as well. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Rod.
All right, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you all.
It was really great meeting you.
Oh.